The quantum communication arrays of the Galactic Confederation trembled with an unexpected transmission. Commander Zixtal's six-fingered hand hovered over the reception controls, translucent skin flickering with an iridescent uncertainty that betrayed generations of galactic exploration. The signal was unlike anything in the Confederation's vast archives. Not the pristine, mathematically perfect broadcasts of advanced civilizations, nor the desperate, chaotic emissions of developing species. This was something else entirely, a raw, unfiltered cacophony of human voices overlaid with industrial sounds, mechanical rhythms, and what sounded remarkably like an intense argument about resource allocation. Zixtal's translation matrix worked furiously, parsing fragments of heated dialogue. "We can't allocate more resources to the Mars colony without compromising Earth's infrastructure," a female voice declared, sharp and unyielding. Another voice, male and equally intense, responded with a complex technical argument about long-term sustainability. The junior communication specialist, Tikara, a wisp of an Aryan whose body seemed more suggestion than substance, leaned closer to the data streams. Her delicate fingers, more like luminescent tendrils, traced the signal's origin point. "Commander," she whispered, her voice a near-silent flutter. "Their transmission is coming from a planetary system with gravitational readings that should be impossible." Impossible was a word rarely used in the Galactic Confederation. They had cataloged millions of planetary systems, encountered thousands of sentient species, yet this transmission challenged everything they understood about technological development and biological adaptation. The visual components began to resolve. Glimpses of a world so dense, so gravitationally intense, that the very image seemed compressed, vibrating with potential energy. Structures that looked simultaneously primitive and ingeniously complex. Humans moving with a deliberate grace that suggested something profound about their evolutionary history. "Their communication equipment," Tikara continued, her voice now tinged with an emotion rare among her species, genuine curiosity, "is functioning perfectly under conditions that would crush our most advanced technology." Zixtal's crystalline eyes narrowed. The transmission wasn't just a message, it was a challenge. Centuries of galactic exploration had taught the Confederation that first contacts were delicate, complex negotiations. But something about this transmission suggested these humans operated by entirely different rules. The background data told a story of a species that had emerged from a planetary environment that should have been fundamentally hostile to complex life. High gravity, unpredictable climate systems, limited resources. Yet here they were, not just surviving, but broadcasting their existence across interstellar distances with a casual confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Prepare a scout mission," Zixtal finally commanded, the words carrying the weight of institutional curiosity and nascent respect. "I want a full xenobiological and technological assessment team. These humans, they are not what we expected." Tikara's response was immediate, her movements precise. But beneath her professional demeanor, something else stirred, a recognition that they were witnessing something unprecedented. The first tremors of a fundamental shift in galactic understanding were already beginning to ripple through the Confederation's vast networks. Little did they know that this transmission was merely a prelude. Humanity was about to introduce itself to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the communication arrays continued to process the signal, the first seeds of uncertainty began to sprout in the Confederation's collective consciousness. Something extraordinary was coming, carried on the compressed energy of a transmission from a world unlike any they had ever encountered. The scout ship's preparations began, marked by a tension that spoke of both scientific excitement and a growing, undefined apprehension. Humanity's first true introduction to the galactic stage was imminent, and the universe was about to learn that not all evolutionary paths are created equal. The standardized testing station hung in the void of space, a marvel of galactic engineering designed to neutralize planetary variations and create the most equitable environment for interspecies comparisons. Its gleaming surfaces reflected the cold calculation of generations of scientific protocol, a testament to the Confederation's commitment to objective evaluation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the entrance, her compact frame a study in compressed potential. Standing just 5'6", she carried herself with a predatory grace that made her seem larger than her physical dimensions suggested. Behind her, the human delegation moved with a synchronicity that immediately set them apart. Each step deliberate, each movement economic yet powerful. The alien observation team consisted of representatives from 12 different species, each more exotic than the last. The Aryan observers were particularly notable, beings of such delicate construction that they seemed more like living crystal than biological entities. Their translucent bodies shimmered with an inner light, a stark contrast to the solid, muscular humans. "Initial assessment protocol will begin," announced Harlock, the chief adjudicator, his voice a series of clicks and harmonic undertones that translated perfectly through the station's communication systems. Participants will complete a series of standardized physical and cognitive challenges designed to measure adaptive capabilities. The first challenge was deceptively simple, a multi-axis mobility test that had broken the spirits of countless species before. Previous participants typically required extensive anti-gravity assistance, their bodies unable to generate sufficient muscular force to move efficiently in the station's controlled environment. Jack Harper, a former Marine and the team's primary physical specialist, stepped forward first. Where other species approached the challenge with trepidation, he moved with an almost casual confidence that immediately caught the observer's attention. The test began. Harper's movements were unlike anything the observers had seen. Each step generated a power that seemed to defy the station's carefully calibrated low-gravity environment. Where other species would float or struggle, he moved as if the reduced gravity was merely a mild inconvenience. His muscles, developed under Earth's crushing gravitational pull, responded to the environment with a dynamism that bordered on the miraculous. Dr. Rodriguez watched, a slight smile playing on her lips. This was more than a physical test. This was a statement, a declaration of humanity's unique evolutionary path. The cognitive challenges proved equally remarkable. Tasks that required split-second decision-making and complex spatial reasoning revealed a neural plasticity that left the alien observers stunned. The human team didn't just solve problems, they reimagined them, finding solutions that were as elegant as they were unexpected. "Preliminary medical scans are showing unprecedented results," muttered Dr. Mikhail Volkov, the team's medical expert, reviewing holographic data streams. Cellular regeneration rates, neural response times, muscular efficiency, they're off our previous computational models. By the test's midpoint, the atmosphere in the observation deck had transformed. What began as clinical assessment had become something closer to barely concealed fascination. The Aryan representatives huddled in tight clusters, their luminescent bodies flickering with what could only be described as a mixture of fear and reluctant admiration. Zarlok's final assessment was televised across multiple galactic communication channels. "The human delegation has not merely completed the standard challenges," he announced, his voice carrying a weight of professional surprise. "They have fundamentally challenged our understanding of biological adaptation." Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, her movements a controlled demonstration of raw, compressed power. "We're not here to prove superiority," she said, her voice calm and direct. "We're here to demonstrate what's possible when a species evolves under challenging conditions." The implications were clear. Humanity wasn't just another species to be cataloged and understood. They were a fundamental force of nature, shaped by a planet that most would consider inhospitable, transformed into something extraordinary. As the tests concluded, the galaxy watched, and for the first time in millennia, the Galactic Confederation found itself genuinely uncertain about what might come next. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation's top xenobiologists convened in a chamber that hummed with technological precision. Holographic displays materialized, showing cellular comparisons that would challenge the fundamental understanding of biological adaptation across known space. Dr. Mikhail Volkov stood at the center of the chamber, his presentation loading with a deliberate calm that masked the revolutionary nature of his findings. Once a leading researcher at the Moscow Gravitational Biology Institute, Volkov represented humanity with an academic rigor that was both precise and provocative. "What we're observing," he began, his voice steady and clinical, "is not an anomaly. It is a complete reimagining of evolutionary potential." The holographic displays zoomed into human cellular structures, revealing microscopic adaptations that defied conventional biological understanding. Where other species showed linear evolutionary progress, human cellular structures demonstrated a dynamic responsiveness that bordered on the impossible. Bone marrow, typically a passive producer of blood cells, showed unprecedented stem cell generation capabilities. Muscle fibers contained microstructures that could rapidly recalibrate to environmental stress in a matter of hours, not generations. The neural pathways displayed a plasticity that suggested continuous, real-time adaptation. And Krexian xenobiologist, her exoskeleton shifting with visible agitation, interrupted. "These readings are mathematically improbable. Your species should have been crushed by its own planetary conditions." Volkov's smile was not warm. It was the smile of someone who had just unveiled a fundamental truth about the universe. "Exactly," he responded. "We didn't just survive. We evolved to thrive." The presentation continued, revealing layer after layer of human biological complexity. The gravitational stress of Earth hadn't been a limitation. It had been the ultimate evolutionary training ground. Every cellular mechanism had been optimized for survival under conditions that would have destroyed less resilient life forms. Muscle density that allowed for explosive power generation, cardiovascular systems that could manage extreme pressure variations, neurological networks that could process and adapt to environmental challenges with unprecedented speed. The human body was not just a biological entity, it was a living, breathing adaptive system. "Your species develops muscle memory in hours," Volkov explained. "That would take other species decades to achieve. Your cellular regeneration rates are exponential. Your neural plasticity suggests a form of continuous learning that is unprecedented in our records." The chamber grew silent. The implications were staggering. Humanity represented more than just another species. They were a fundamental challenge to everything the Confederation understood about biological potential. Dr. Ilaris, the lead Confederation xenobiologist, her crystalline body flickering with complex emotional responses, spoke softly. "They are not just survivors. They are living proof that evolution is far more dynamic than our current models suggest." Volkov's final slide showed a comparative analysis. Where other species required extensive technological intervention to survive in challenging environments, humans seemed to generate biological solutions in real time. Their very existence was a rebuke to the notion of biological limitations. "We didn't choose to evolve this way," Volkov concluded. "Our planet chose us." The presentation concluded, but the conversation was just beginning. The Galactic Confederation found itself confronting a fundamental question. What happens when a species emerges that doesn't just adapt to its environment, but transforms it? Outside the chamber, news of the presentation was already spreading across communication networks. Humanity was no longer just another entry in the galactic catalog. They were a force of nature, a biological marvel that challenged every preconceived notion of evolutionary potential. The universe was about to learn that some species don't just survive. Some species redefine the very meaning of survival. The Grand Diplomatic Chamber of the Galactic Confederation trembled with an energy that defied its millennia-old architectural stability. Holographic representations of various species flickered and shifted, their usual composed demeanors replaced by something closer to barely contained panic. Ambassador Lyrax of the Aryan Diplomatic Corps stood at the center, her crystalline body casting prismatic reflections across the chamber's obsidian walls. Her voice, typically a model of diplomatic restraint, carried an uncharacteristic edge of desperation. "The human potential represents an unprecedented variable in our galactic stability," she argued, her translucent fingers tracing complex diplomatic graphs. Their biological adaptability is not just a scientific curiosity. It is a potential existential threat to the current galactic order. The chamber erupted into a cacophony of translations, diplomatic warnings, and barely suppressed fear. Where previous first contact scenarios had been carefully managed, controlled interactions that maintained the delicate balance of galactic power, humanity had arrived like a quantum disruption in a carefully calibrated system. The Kivar military delegation, known for their ruthless expansionist strategies, saw an immediate threat. Their representative, General Kravex, a being composed of metallic exoskeleton and neural cybernetics, leaned forward with predatory calculation. "We cannot allow an uncontrolled variable of this magnitude," Kravex stated, his voice a mechanized growl. "A species that can adapt faster than our most advanced technological systems represents a fundamental challenge to galactic stability." But not all voices were aligned in fear. Ambassador Dr. Shalera of the Quantum Exploration Collective saw opportunity where others saw threat. Her multidimensional perspective recognized something profound in the human potential. "Adaptation is not aggression," she countered, her form simultaneously occupying multiple spatial references. "These humans are not seeking conquest. They are demonstrating a fundamental truth about evolutionary potential that we have overlooked for millennia." Behind the diplomatic posturing, deeper currents of change were emerging. The human demonstration had exposed fundamental weaknesses in the Confederation's understanding of biological potential. Species that had long considered themselves evolutionary pinnacles now found themselves reassessing their entire philosophical and biological worldview. The Aryan diplomatic court, traditionally the most influential species in galactic negotiations, found their delicate, low-gravity bodies suddenly seeming fragile and limited. Their diplomatic soft power, once considered the ultimate tool of galactic influence, now appeared almost quaint in comparison to human adaptability. Economic projections began to shift. Corporations and resource management councils started recalculating human potential. A species that could adapt so rapidly represented not just a military or scientific variable, but an unprecedented economic opportunity. Consider their potential in terraforming. One economic analyst noted her holographic representation displaying complex resource allocation models. A species that can survive and thrive under extreme planetary conditions could revolutionize our entire approach to planetary development. A recording of Dr. Elena Rodriguez's earlier statement began to circulate through diplomatic channels. "We're not here to conquer," she had said, her voice calm and direct. "We're here to collaborate." The statement was both a promise and a subtle threat. Collaboration, from a species with such remarkable adaptive capabilities, meant something fundamentally different than previous diplomatic interactions. Backroom negotiations exploded with tension. Some factions argued for immediate containment, for creating diplomatic barriers that could limit human expansion. Others saw an unprecedented opportunity for mutual growth, for challenging the existing galactic paradigms. The Kivar military faction pushed for aggressive containment strategies. "We must establish strict interaction protocols," Kravex demanded. "Limit their potential for expansion, create diplomatic firewalls." But Dr. Shalera's perspective gained traction. Containment, she argued, is impossible against a species that defines itself by overcoming limitations. As the diplomatic session continued, one fundamental truth became increasingly clear. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as a new player, but as a fundamental force of change. Their very existence challenged every existing model of species interaction, biological potential, and evolutionary understanding. The universe was about to be redesigned, not through conquest, but through an unprecedented capacity for adaptation. And humanity was just getting started. The challenge arena materialized like a wound in the fabric of space, a composite environment that shifted between extreme conditions, designed to be the ultimate test of galactic species capabilities. The Kivar military had crafted this gauntlet with a singular purpose: to break the spirit of any potential rival. 12 previous spacefaring races had attempted the challenge. 12 had failed spectacularly. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the entrance, her team assembled with a precision that spoke of years of training under Earth's unforgiving gravitational conditions. Jack Harper to her right, Dr. Mikhail Volkov to her left, and a carefully selected team that represented the most adaptive potential of human capability. Kavar master strategist Zarek watched from the observation deck, his multi-jointed cybernetic body coiled with predatory anticipation. "The humans will be the 13th, he whispered to his adjutant, "and they will break like all the others." The challenge began. The first stage was a gravitational manipulation field designed to incapacitate. Previous participants had been reduced to quivering biomass within moments, their neural systems overwhelmed by rapid gravitational shifts that mimicked the most extreme planetary compression scenarios. Jack Harper moved first. Where other species would collapse, he adjusted. His muscles, developed under Earth's 9.8 meters per second squared gravitational pull, responded to the environmental stress with a dynamism that defied computational prediction. Each gravitational shift became not a challenge, but a problem to be solved. "Adaptive response pattern identified," Dr. Volkov muttered, monitoring the team's biological responses. "Neural recalibration occurring in real time." The environment change. Radiation levels spiked to quantities that would sterilize most biological systems. Temperature variations occurred with quantum unpredictability. Atmospheric composition shifted between molecular states that should have been impossible to survive. The human team didn't just survive. They analyzed. They adapted. Elena Rodriguez's strategic mind turned the Kivar's elaborate trap into an opportunity for demonstration. Each stage became a ballet of human ingenuity, improvising solutions that left the observers stunned, and the Kivar increasingly desperate. Zarek's confidence began to erode. The challenge moved through increasingly complex scenarios. Gravitational manipulation gave way to quantum entanglement challenges. Spatial disorientation tests that had previously caused instantaneous neurological collapse became mere puzzles for the human team. "They're not just responding," Dr. Volkov observed, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and professional detachment. "They're learning. Each challenge is becoming a data point for future adaptation." By the challenge's midpoint, the observation deck had transformed. What began as a demonstration of species superiority had become something closer to a live scientific breakthrough. The Kivar observers grew quiet, their usual aggressive posturing replaced by a growing sense of something between fear and reluctant admiration. Jack Harper's performance was particularly remarkable. A former Marine who had trained in some of Earth's most challenging environmental simulation facilities, he moved through the challenges with a fluid grace that suggested the environment was merely a suggestion, not a limitation. In one particularly complex stage involving simultaneous gravitational, thermal, and quantum mechanical stress, Harper not only maintained consciousness, but developed a counter technique that left the Kivar computational systems struggling to analyze. "Impossible," Zarek muttered, his cybernetic systems working overtime to process the data. Elena Rodriguez understood something profound was happening. This wasn't just a test of human capability. This was a fundamental demonstration of evolutionary potential. Each challenge became an opportunity, each environmental stress a chance to demonstrate the remarkable adaptability that had defined humanity's journey. As the final stages approached, it became clear that the Kivar had fundamentally miscalculated. They had designed a challenge meant to break. Instead, they had created a showcase for humanity's most remarkable characteristic: the ability to transform limitation into opportunity. The universe was watching, and humanity was rewriting the rules of biological potential, one impossible challenge at a time. The quantum sensors monitoring the challenge event captured something unprecedented, a biological response that defied every existing model of neural adaptation and species potential. Dr. Mikhail Volkov stood transfixed, his scientific detachment crumbling in the face of what could only be described as a fundamental transformation of understanding. The human neural patterns weren't just responding to the extreme environmental challenges. They were evolving in real time, creating new neural pathways faster than any known biological system could process. Jack Harper had become the epicenter of this extraordinary moment. During a critical segment of the challenge involving simultaneous quantum entanglement and gravitational stress, Harper's neural network began displaying activity that looked less like a biological response and more like a living, adaptive computational system. His brain was literally redesigning itself with each microsecond of environmental challenge. "This is beyond adaptation," Volkov whispered, his hands trembling as he reviewed the data. "This is transformation." The Galactic Confederation's lead scientist, an ancient being who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, leaned forward. The holographic displays showed Harper's neural activity as a complex, ever-shifting mandala of biological potential. "They're not just surviving," the scientist muttered, a statement that would be quoted across multiple star systems. "They're learning faster than our most advanced artificial intelligence." The challenge arena had become more than a test. It was a live demonstration of humanity's most profound evolutionary characteristic, the ability to transform limitation into opportunity. Each environmental stress became a data point. Each challenge, a chance to demonstrate a biological plasticity that challenged fundamental understanding of neural development. Harper's brain was rewriting its own operational parameters in real time, creating new neural connections faster than the quantum sensors could track. Elena Rodriguez watched from the command position, her strategic mind processing the implications. This wasn't just a physical challenge. This was a fundamental reimagining of biological potential. The Kavar observers grew increasingly agitated. Their computational models, developed over millennia of galactic conquest, began to break down. Harper's neural response patterns didn't just defy prediction. They seemed to exist in a state of continuous, probabilistic potential. "Quantum indeterminacy," Dr. Volkov muttered, but with biological agency. The human team's performance transformed the challenge from a test of species capability into a live demonstration of evolutionary potential. Where other species saw obstacles, humans saw opportunities for transformation. Each environmental stress became a chance to demonstrate a remarkable capacity for real-time adaptation. Zarek, the Kavar master strategist, watched in growing horror as his carefully designed challenge dissolved into something entirely unexpected. The humans weren't just surviving the impossible. They were redefining the very concept of survival. The quantum sensors continued to capture data that would take generations to fully understand. Harper's neural activity suggested something profound, that consciousness itself could be a dynamic, adaptive system rather than a fixed state of being. "We are witnessing the emergence of a new form of biological intelligence," the Confederation's lead scientist announced, his voice carrying the weight of millennia of scientific observation. As the challenge progressed, it became clear that humanity had arrived in the galactic arena not as another species to be categorized, but as a fundamental force of evolutionary potential. Their very existence challenged every existing model of biological development, neural plasticity, and species interaction. The universe was about to learn that some species don't just adapt. Some species fundamentally reimagine the very nature of adaptation, and humanity was just beginning to understand its own potential. The quantum moment continued, a live demonstration of a species that had turned planetary limitation into its greatest evolutionary advantage. The transmission spread faster than light-speed communications, a wave of revelation that reshaped the fundamental understanding of biological potential across known space. Humanity's performance in the Crucible Challenge became more than a diplomatic incident. It was a paradigm-shifting moment that would be studied for generations. News networks across hundreds of star systems carried the footage. Millions of species watched as the human delegation transformed what was supposed to be a test of limitation into a demonstration of unprecedented evolutionary potential. Dr. Elena Rodriguez became an unexpected icon, her measured responses and strategic brilliance capturing the imagination of cultures that had never before considered humanity as anything more than a curiosity. The Aryan Diplomatic Corps, once the undisputed masters of galactic negotiation, found themselves obsolete. Their delicate negotiation techniques seemed almost quaint compared to the human capacity for adaptive communication. Rodriguez's negotiations were a masterclass in strategic interaction, each conversation a complex dance of information, potential, and unspoken capability. Diplomatic channels that were once closed suddenly burst open. Species that had previously viewed humans with dismissive curiosity now sought active collaboration. The quantum data from Jack Harper's neural responses became the most studied scientific document in galactic history. Research institutions across multiple star systems competed for access to even the most minute details of human biological adaptation. "We are not seeking conquest," Rodriguez stated in a transmission that would be replayed millions of times. "We are seeking understanding." The statement carried a weight that went beyond mere diplomatic rhetoric. It was a fundamental challenge to the existing galactic power structures. Humanity wasn't interested in the traditional paths of species expansion, territorial conquest, resource extraction, technological dominance. They were offering something far more dangerous: genuine collaboration. The Kivar military, humiliated by the Crucible challenge, found themselves at a crossroads. Their entire strategic doctrine had been built on the assumption of species hierarchies, of clear lines of technological and biological superiority. The humans had demolished those assumptions in a single demonstration. Economic models began to shift dramatically. Corporations and resource management councils recognized that a species with such adaptive potential represented an unprecedented economic opportunity. Human expertise became the most sought-after commodity in galactic markets. Dr. Mikhail Volkov found himself at the center of a scientific revolution. Research grants, collaborative opportunities, and invitations from the most prestigious scientific institutions across multiple star systems flooded his communication channels. The biological data from the human delegation was rewriting fundamental understanding of evolutionary potential. The Quantum Exploration Collective saw something even more profound. The human demonstration suggested that adaptation wasn't just a biological process, but a fundamental state of consciousness. Their neural plasticity implied a form of intelligence that was less about fixed knowledge and more about continuous transformation. "They are not a species," one quantum collective researcher noted. "They are a process of continuous becoming." Planetary development councils began reimagining entire colonization strategies. A species that could adapt so rapidly to extreme conditions represented a fundamental shift in understanding of biological potential. Terraforming projects that had been considered impossible now seemed not just potential, but inevitable. As diplomatic and scientific opportunities multiplied, something even more remarkable happened. Individual humans became ambassadors of a new understanding. Their very existence challenged the notion of species limitation. Each interaction became an opportunity for cross-cultural understanding, for demonstrating a form of adaptive intelligence that transcended traditional biological boundaries. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had arrived not with a conquest, but with a fundamental reimagining of what was possible. The recognition was complete. Humanity was no longer just another species in the galactic catalog. They were a force of potential, a living demonstration that limitation was nothing more than an opportunity for transformation. The final act of humanity's introduction to the galactic stage was both a conclusion and a beginning. The Galactic Confederation's formal recognition ceremony took place on a neutral space station that seemed to hover between multiple dimensional references, a fitting venue for a moment that would redefine species potential. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a chamber that represented millennia of galactic diplomatic protocol. Behind her, the human delegation. Jack Harper, Dr. Mikhail Volkov, and the other team members represented not just a diplomatic mission, but a fundamental statement about evolutionary potential. "We are not here to replace," Rodriguez stated, her voice carrying the compressed energy of a species forged in planetary adversity, "but to collaborate." The chamber fell silent. Representatives from thousands of species watched, their sensory apparatus attuned to every microscopic detail of the human presentation. The quantum sensors that had tracked their performance during the Crucible Challenge were now calibrated to record every nuance of this moment. The Confederation's recognition was more than a diplomatic formality. It was a fundamental reshaping of galactic understanding. Humanity was no longer classified as a developing species, but as a unique evolutionary marvel, a living demonstration that planetary conditions were not a limitation, but the most comprehensive training ground in existence. Jack Harper's neural data continued to be studied. The quantum patterns of his brain during the challenges had revealed something profound, a form of biological intelligence that existed in a state of continuous adaptation. Where other species saw fixed states of being, humans represented a process of perpetual becoming. Dr. Volkov's research teams were already developing collaborative projects that would reshape multiple scientific disciplines: terraforming techniques, adaptive medical technologies, neural interface systems. The potential seemed infinite. The Kuvvar military, once the most aggressive expansionist force in the galaxy, found themselves fundamentally transformed by the human demonstration. Their entire strategic doctrine, built on assumptions of technological superiority, had been demolished by a species that turned limitation into opportunity. A transmission from Earth accompanied the recognition ceremony. Brief, cryptic, filled with potential. "We've just started," it said. The message carried multiple layers of meaning. It was a promise, a challenge, and a fundamental statement about human potential. The galaxy realized it had not just encountered a new species, but a fundamental force of adaptation and possibility. Individual human representatives began to be invited to collaborative projects across multiple star systems, not as subordinates or curiosities, but as equal partners in a grand exploration of potential. Their very existence suggested that the boundaries of biological and technological capability were far more fluid than previously understood. The Aryan Diplomatic Corps, once the undisputed masters of galactic negotiation, found themselves learning from human interaction techniques. The delicate art of diplomacy was being rewritten by a species that approached every challenge as an opportunity for mutual understanding. As the ceremony concluded, something profound became clear. Humanity had not arrived to conquer or compete. They had arrived to demonstrate that the universe was far more complex, far more adaptive, than any existing model of understanding. The final holographic display showed a composite image, the human delegation against a backdrop of Earth, that small blue planet with its crushing gravity, its unpredictable environments, its relentless evolutionary pressure. A reminder that the most remarkable adaptations often emerge from the most challenging conditions. The universe was about to change, and humanity was just beginning to understand its own potential. *, we just started *.